The vast cosmic void stretched endlessly, silent yet filled with unspoken tension. In the infinite abyss between realities, where neither time nor space dictated existence, two figures stood, an anomaly in the grand design of creation. On one side, an entity of pure omnipotence, the Beyonder. He was not a god nor a mortal, but something beyond all comprehension. In his original form, he had been a universe unto himself, far greater than the sum of all existence in Marvel's multiverse. His very presence bent reality to his whim, as though were mere paint on a cosmic canvas, waiting for him to create, reshape, or erase. Opposite him stood a being who had long abandoned humanity, Dr. Manhattan, the quantum deity from the DC multiverse, an entity who had shed all mortal constraints and become a walking paradox of time and space. Clad in a simple, glowing blue form, his eyes burned like miniature stars, revealing the infinite sequences of past, present, and future simultaneously. The two beings did not belong in the same reality, yet now, they stood face to face, the very fabric of the omniverse trembling in anticipation. The Beyonder observed his adversary with mild curiosity. "You are unlike the others," he mused, his voice not spoken, but merely understood across all levels of existence. "I see no fear in your eyes, no desperate will to resist." How intriguing. Dr. Manhattan did not blink. He simply existed. "You are an anomaly," Manhattan finally replied, his tone void of emotion, yet echoing across infinite timelines. "A paradox that does not fit within the boundaries of structured reality. That is why I am here." The Beyonder smirked. "You think yourself my equal?" Dr. Manhattan lifted a hand. Stars began to collapse. Entire galaxies twisted in upon themselves as he willed the laws of physics to betray their own nature. In his presence, the once immutable flow of cause and effect fractured. He had rewritten reality before it even realized it had been changed. The Beyonder merely watched. "Interesting," he said, "but irrelevant." With a mere thought, the fabric of the omniverse began to change. The collapsing stars at Manhattan had erased returned, not as they were before, but as something entirely new. Strange, chaotic geometries took form, impossible shapes manifesting in colors that had never before existed. Manhattan saw something he had never encountered. A change beyond even his own perception of time. Dr. Manhattan frowned. This was new. Manhattan lifted a single finger. A pulse of energy, more than a billion supernovas, erupted from him, a wave of raw creation meant to overwrite all that was. Reality itself rippled, breaking down into its most fundamental particles, rewriting all existence from the ground up. The wave touched the Beyonder. And then, nothing. The Beyonder smirked. "Ah, I see. You believe reality obeys laws that even I must follow. How amusing." He raised a hand and snapped his fingers. Dr. Manhattan ceased to exist. For the first time in all his existence, Manhattan felt nothing. He was nowhere and everywhere. He had never been born, never existed. No memory of him remained in the multiverse. He had been undone, yet impossibly he returned. Manhattan forced himself back into existence, his form flickering across infinite dimensions. He had never needed to resist erasure before. There had been nothing in his universe capable of such a feat. Yet here he was, reforging himself. He reassembled not as a singular being, but as multiple versions of himself, each existing on a different quantum frequency. "Fascinating," the Beyonder mused. "You refuse oblivion. Perhaps you are more amusing than I thought." Manhattan's expression remained blank, yet something in him had shifted. He did not feel anger, nor fear, but for the first time, he was uncertain. Dr. Manhattan raised his hand again, but this time, he did not seek to merely rewrite. He sought to unravel the Beyonder, to reduce him into pure nothingness, to separate his essence across infinite realities, so that he could never exist again. A golden glow surrounded the Beyonder, an unfamiliar force attempting to pull him apart from within. The very concept of his being was challenged. For the first time, the Beyonder's expression changed. A small frown. Then, amusement returned to his face. "A cute trick," he said, before he simply willed it away. Manhattan's effort collapsed in an instant, his power folding into itself, dissolving into something meaningless. The Beyonder took a step forward. The omniverse shook. And suddenly, the battle was no longer confined to one place. They were everywhere at once, fighting across every timeline, in every possible version of reality. One version of them battled in the ruins of a dead universe, the corpses of long-forgotten gods scattered beneath their feet. Another version clashed within the source wall, breaking pieces of an eternal structure apart with every strike. One Manhattan collapsed into a singularity, trying to compress the Beyonder into a state of absolute nothingness. The Beyonder, however, merely laughed, rewriting the singularity into a flower, watching as it bloomed and withered in an instant. Manhattan duplicated himself infinitely, sending endless versions to attack from every possible moment in time. But the Beyonder simply chose which ones to acknowledge. The battle was not equal. Dr. Manhattan, for all his cosmic might, operated within a framework of logic, of cause and effect, a god bound by his own understanding of reality. The Beyonder was beyond all such things. As the last of Manhattan's duplicates began to fade, the Beyonder raised a single finger. "I have seen enough," he declared. "This game is over." And with that, he made his final move. Time shattered. Causality ended. Dr. Manhattan's form began to dissolve. But this time, there was no coming back. For the first time in his existence, Dr. Manhattan felt fear. Dr. Manhattan had never known death. Not truly. He had disintegrated once, long ago, in that fateful accident that turned him into something more than human. But death had been an illusion. His molecules had merely reorganized, his consciousness slipping through time like water through fingers. Yet now, as the Beyonder unmade the very concept of existence around him, he knew fear. The omniverse itself had begun to unravel. The battle had stretched across countless dimensions, rupturing timelines, warping physics, breaking the rules of causality itself. Manhattan was losing, but he was not yet defeated. Dr. Manhattan reassembled himself once more, but this time, he did something different. His body expanded, stretching beyond the confines of any singular form. He had always been limited by perspective, by viewing reality through the constraints of past, present, and future all at once. But he let go. The concept of time ceased to exist for him. He became a being of pure quantum thought, no longer tethered to linear cause and effect. He reached out into the fundamental structure of all creation, tapping into the very forces that shaped existence. Then he struck, a single movement, a flick of his hand, and the multiverse began to fold in upon itself. Entire universes collapsed into nothingness. The great cosmic entities of both the Marvel and DC multiverses blinked out existence as Manhattan's power surged beyond limits. This was no longer mere atomic manipulation. Manhattan was rewriting reality itself. The Beyonder laughed, not in mockery, not in condescension, but in genuine amusement. "You finally understand," he said, watching as the multiverse crumbled around him. "But it is still not enough." The Beyonder raised his hand, and everything Dr. Manhattan had just done was undone. Reality reset. The destroyed universes returned as if nothing had ever happened. The cosmic beings reappeared, unaware they had ever perished. Time resumed its natural flow. Dr. Manhattan blinked. This was impossible, but it had happened. Manhattan did not stop. His form split into an infinite number of versions, each one existing at a different quantum wavelength. One attempted to erase the Beyonder from existence. Another tried to rewrite the concept of power itself, stripping the Beyonder of his omnipotence. A third wove a paradox so intricate that it should have broken the logic of reality itself. None of it worked. The Beyonder simply ignored these attacks, choosing which ones to acknowledge, as though he were choosing to listen or ignore a whisper in the wind. Dr. Manhattan began to fragment. He had always believed himself above emotion, beyond the trivial concerns of human conflict. But now, he understood despair. "You are bound by your own understanding," the Beyonder said, stepping forward. "You see past, present, and future all at once, but I am beyond such limitations. You think power has rules. It does not. I decide what is real, and I decide that you lose." Dr. Manhattan raised his hand one last time. A final surge of power erupted from him, stronger than anything he had ever done before. The omniverse collapsed. Not just universes, not just realities. Everything, all things, concepts, time, thought, existence itself, folded into oblivion. Dr. Manhattan felt himself fading. And then, the Beyonder put it all back, as if it had never happened. Dr. Manhattan's form flickered. His blue glow dimmed. His body, which had once been a perfect embodiment of quantum energy, began to unravel. For the first time since his ascension, he could feel himself dying. He looked at the Beyonder, and for the first time, he asked a question he had never considered before. What are you? The Beyonder smiled. I am what comes next. And with a final flick of his fingers, Dr. Manhattan ceased to exist. This time, there was no coming back. No reconstruction. No rebirth. No future. Dr. Manhattan was gone, and the Beyonder stood alone, victorious,